You're listening to A Radio.
On the landing ground.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. So, here we are. Just a day or two has passed. Many thoughts have passed through my mind. Not least, of course, what the future holds for us in Canada. It's hard for me and others to understate what is at stake. There will be recriminations in the days, weeks and months ahead. In all parties, even the Liberals. They have had serious damage done to them in Quebec. And that's the least of it. As I have said, in recent weeks, we have to thank one group of citizens in particular for our current situation, or as I would like to put it, dilemma. A group of citizens so tied up in their own greed and selfishness and self-centred attitude towards the rest of the country that many Canadians frankly would not recognise them as Canadians. The citizens I talk about are the ones that reside en masse in the telephone area codes of 416 and 905 in Ontario. And those of you who don't live in Canada and don't understand what that means, I just have one town to name. It's Toronto. It's the province of Ontario. That's state to people outside of Canada. One town holds the rest of Canada hostage because there are so many constituencies there, far too many for equal representation across the rest of the country. Is this by accident, I ask? I doubt it, but the facts are the facts. These people who live there are only thinking about how much they will get from the government. How many freebies can they get? Let that be a warning to my American friends. Human nature is human nature after all. They care nothing for the rest of us. Millions, if not billions of dollars are pumped into this area every year for public transport of all types. So why would they care about higher prices for gasoline and cars? They are living off a massive tax base and honestly believe nothing affects them. They think they're fireproof in Toronto. Well, I've got news for them. They're not. The same applies to Ottawa, by the way. They don't care that food prices have gone up 20% in the last 12 months in Canada. 20%, think of that. 1/5. They think everyone should drive electric cars. They care nothing for the rest of the country, only looking down their nose at people who live there, venturing out of the city from their ivory towers to their cottages in midsummer when the heat is too much for them. Winter they vacation down south, while the rest of us suffer and some perish, literally die in the bitter cold, not being able to afford the heat their houses require to keep them warm in the winter, and the power to keep their houses cool in the summer. They are, in fact, the Canadian urban deplorables. Not really worth calling them Canadians, for they only think of themselves. In Britain, we have a phrase for people like that. It's, "I'm all right, Jack." It means, I'm okay, I don't give a damn about you. So in simple terms, the election of the Prime Minister in Canada all depends on this group. No one else matters in Canada. If you can win here, it's a done deal. So the Liberals and all others concentrate their efforts here. Shameful, but true. So the upshot is that the Liberals win with a minority, but they've won. So they're able to buddy up with the NDP and the Bloc and will force onto Canadians a debilitating carbon tax, a tax that will ultimately force most Canadian industries to leave the country, along with their jobs, I might add. So in the end, everything that Toronto has built will be gone, and with that the need for such a large population. So I guess, in a way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and will ultimately lead in the long term to the actual depopulation of the province of Ontario, as, to put it bluntly, the rats leave the sinking ship and the future bankrupt city. So I give you Detroit of the North, probably 10 years from now, because there won't be any car industry, there won't be any steel industry, and all the jobs that go with those businesses. Toronto is in fact a bubble, just like Ottawa's a bubble built on the federal government of Canada. There's nothing there really. However, there's one problem with that. There will be nowhere for these people to flee to in Canada, because the countryside will be empty, because those jobs will have gone too. That's how serious it is to ignore the West. Because 10 years from now, there won't be a Western Canada to bash and tax to death. So what will they do then? So since I've written this, there's been an update. There's been basically a first salvo that has been fired. That being a 5-page letter from the Premier, that's Governor of Alberta, Jason Kenney. In it, he's very polite, but makes it equally clear that Alberta and the West spoke very loudly about their voice this last Monday in the general election, and it wasn't Liberal or Liberal policies. He made it equally clear that unfair taxes on his province and the West in general would not stand. Now, he didn't say those exact words, but the intent was clearly there. Alberta and the West have been treated like lepers, no more, they say, and their right to sell their products, or lack thereof, does affect the future unity of Canada, whether the Liberals like it or not. So we will see where this goes, won't we? I'm sure there'll be a shot across the bows of Alberta coming quickly back from the federal government of Canada. And one final point to those stupid, selfish people in Toronto. As somebody once said, elections have consequences. Just remember this when something does affect you that you're unhappy about. And remember, you voted for them. Oh, I'm trying to think of something that might affect you. Oh, I know. Let's say extra taxes on the internet and restrictions thereof. What you can and cannot say on the internet. Remember, we did warn you loudly and clearly what was coming, and you ignored us. And when your right to practice your belief is questioned in the near future, if not banned in public places, and you can't use your summer vacation place because of climate change, and you can't afford to warm your house in the winter time, not forgetting, of course, you can't get a doctor or health care because they've been taxed out of all existence. Just remember, it was you who could have stopped all this. No one else in Canada, regrettably, had that power. And now, thanks to you, no one probably ever will again. And then there's this. The voice of Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, in his own words.
Yesterday, Albertans spoke with a louder voice than they have ever done in federal electoral history. In fact, I believe, I haven't been able to confirm this 100%, but to the best of my knowledge, last night was the single largest mandate for one federal party in a province since 1867. That's a pretty powerful statement. That was a very diverse spectrum of Albertans who sent a powerful message last night. And many of them are saying they don't feel at home in their own country, which I think is tragic. And so, as I said to Prime Minister Trudeau when we first met in May of this year in his office, I said, Prime Minister, the first obligation of anybody in your position is to strengthen national unity. But it's actually being undermined in the province that has contributed more than any other in our modern economic history. So that's why, Rick, because if you care about unity and prosperity, you should care about how Alberta is doing.
You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, Spotify, and email. We're on Spotify under the podcast section. Type in Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass these links on to your friends. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com/A-Radio. EHRADIO, A-Radio. And please click on the like button. Join us Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern and tell your friends and pass the word. We only tell the truth, not what the mainstream media want you to know.